Hi everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and today I am doing a part 2 to the Silhouette Organization series. We often get many questions on how to organize your digital supplies, how to organize your library. So I started off this year with a series where we're going through everything. The first part of the series is creating backups, and that means to back up everything from your photos to your Silhouette library to your files. And I will put a link in the description below for that tutorial. This next part, we're going to talk specifically about the Silhouette library. So we're going to jump into our Silhouette software here, and the first place that you're going to start, we're going to start up into the library tab in the top right. I will tell you that I am currently using a version 4.4.552. If you're using an older version, you may not see the same options, and I have that all disclosed in my blog post with the written instructions that will follow this video. That'll also be in the link below in the description. So I'm going to start out with the library tab, and we're going to talk a little bit about what your library is made up of. So once you are logged in, it's going to ask you, if you've not logged into your library, it's going to ask you to log in. You can see up here I have my name. We have some options here. Below that is your library tree, and you have some main folders that every user has in their library. So the first thing we'll just talk about a couple of things about the Silhouette library. The first thing I want to let you know is that the library is designed as a syncing device. It is not an all-inclusive storage area. So while you can put your own user-created files in it, or while you can save to the library, that's designed so you can sync it to multiple computers and have easy access to it. There is a storage limit, and you'll see down here in the bottom left corner, you have a storage area. All users get 1 gigabyte of storage for your user-defined user setting designs. I have 5 gigabytes. If you are a Silhouette Club member or a Silhouette Design Store subscriber, you will get up to 5 gigabytes. There is no way to increase this storage outside of certain circumstances. For instance, some of us beta testers may end up with some extra storage just because we do a lot of testing and testing those things out. So there really is no way to increase that. The library is not designed as an all-inclusive storage area. So you want to make sure that you have all of your files backed up to an outside source. And I actually don't use the library too often. I have any files I have saved to my Silhouette library, I have backed up to another source. So if something happens and I were to lose those files, they are not guaranteed to be recoverable by Silhouette. They do try, but they cannot be guaranteed. So I always keep a backup. And that's what the first part of that series was talking about. Now, the second thing I want to mention here is that library organization. I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you, explain to you some of the things in the library, but every user's organization system is going to vary. You may not use the same type of designs that I use, or your categories may not be the same. For instance, I have a wine category. Wine and Christmas and coffee are my largest categories. You may not have those same. You may not have the same workflow that I have, so your folders in your system may look a little bit different. But we'll give you the basics to get started and explain what the library is so that you have a better understanding of it. So the first thing that on the left-hand side is your library tree. You have a folder that's called All Files. When you click on that folder, so it's selected, you'll see gray. On Mac computers, sometimes it's harder to see what's selected. I'm on a Windows computer, so this is All Files. So the little number that's next to it tells you the number of files that are in that folder. So All Files means every single file in your Silhouette library, whether that's files from the design store, files you've put there, or files that you've saved there. The next category is your favorites category, and you can favorite any design in your library by clicking on the little star, and when you do that, it's going to turn blue. So the blue means that it's added into your favorites folder. So if I click on this blue star that I just added, uncheck it, it's going to change that number that's in my favorites folder. So if I check it again, now I have 342. If I uncheck it, I have 341. This folder is for easy access. So I will put designs in here that I want to cut and I don't want to lose. It doesn't necessarily take them out of your library, but it's another way you can organize it so you have easy access to those files. Then you have your fonts folder. And you'll notice here, if you have a plus sign next to your folder, that means that it can be expanded. So if I click on that, it's going to expand the folder out, and we'll get to how to create these folders here in just a second. So I have all these fonts in here. It tells me the number of fonts I have total in that folder, and then the different font files or folders that I have. So your plus sign expands everything out. Then the next main category that you have is called designs. And in this one, I have a couple more that I've created that you won't have, but you can have ebooks. I link in my blog tutorial on how you can find those ebooks. These are free ebooks from Silhouette America, and they come directly into your library. If you are a Cameo 4 or Portrait 3 owner, and this includes all Cameo 4 models, you will have a little folder called Free with Machine. For any older models, those free files just get loaded into your Silhouette library and mixed in with your other designs. So if I click to expand that, it tells me I have a Cameo, and I have 100 of those free designs with that Cameo. The next one down that you will have is project designs. If you have purchased anything from the Silhouette Design Store that is in their projects section, this is a collection of certain projects, say a bouquet of flowers, and they include all of the design files when you purchase that project. So that's where you'll find some of those designs that are grouped together. They're still in your library that you can access otherwise, but it's another way you can quick access those. The next folder is your recent downloads folder. And you notice here I have a plus sign. I'm going to click on this first because you're going to see all these little folders. If I expand that out, you can see here that I have, go back up here, I have a ton of folders. So I've started organization. This is as much for me as it is for all of you too, because I've started organization. If you could see this number clearly, I have over 6,000 designs that I have not organized yet. These are where the Silhouette Design Store files download to when you purchase from the Silhouette Design Store. And then we will come back to that here in just a second. You have your user designs folder underneath as a subcategory of your designs. And this is where you would store your own personal files. The next main folder is called patterns. When you download a pattern or purchase one in the Silhouette Design Store, a pattern that is a printable pattern will show up in this folder. Cut files that are patterns don't show up into the patterns folder. These are for your printable patterns only. And then you have your recycle bin. So if you ever delete anything from your Silhouette library, you then have to empty the recycle bin to remove it completely. So that explains a little bit about your library tree. I want to just quickly focus or mention that you can also change it to list view. I don't use that too often. I really like to use the icons. In the bottom right corner, you have a few more options. You can also increase the size or decrease the size of your icon size, so you can make it easier on your eyes. And again, that's going to vary depending on your user, how big your screen is, how much you can see, or how you have your settings scaled on your computer. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to organize your library. So I'm going to use this designs folder, and we're going to come down here to the recent downloads folder first. I'm going to expand this out so you can see it a little bit. So if I have my recent downloads folder, this is where all of my files from my Silhouette library, before you get started with any sort of organization, there are two things I recommend that you do. The first thing is you want to make sure that your Silhouette software is synced and that it has the current date and the current time here. Make sure that it is synced up so that all of your files have synced into the cloud and everything is kind of stored and it's all up to date. You can click here to force the sync. If it is not syncing, I will put the link up in the description below on the steps you can take, but it's also in the written tutorial that I have linked as well. There are a few more steps that it's just more difficult to go into in one video. But you want to make sure it's synced. You also want to make sure I would do a library export before you start to change anything. Do a library export before you change things, and then after you change things as well, you want to do a library export. So you always have a backup copy to go back to. Then, when you're ready to start organizing, the first thing that you can do is you can create new folders in your Silhouette library. So if I right click on my recent designs, or recent downloads folder, I choose new folder. And now I have a whole bunch of different folders, as you can see. So it's going to show up all the way at the bottom of mine, which is fine. You can see I've tested this a couple times. So normally you'd be able to type immediately in there. I have to right click and rename folder or double click in it. And then I could just type in new demo. Okay, so I can create a new folder. You can create folders in whatever name that you want that's going to work for your organization. So I have folders for flowers. I have 3D flowers. I do have a duplicate folder here. I can talk about that in a second. I've done some demos, so I have some odd names here and there. Animals, backgrounds, whatever topics are going to work for you to be able to find your designs or in the manner that you work with. Even though I have created folders, I find that I use the search in the library the most often, just because it is usually faster for me. But you can organize them all into cards, butterflies, borders, coffee, wine, everything that you can even imagine. I have wine, Christmas, seasons. You'll notice here that I have a plus sign. So I click on that plus sign. I've created subfolders under there, and you do the same thing. Right click, choose new folder. So once you have your folders created, I'm going to come back here to the main recent downloads folder. And then I'm going to come all the way down here to find a file. Let's see if we can find one that I know where I want to put it. Sometimes the longest part of designing things is just finding my file or finding which one I want to do. So for instance, I have these leaves up here. So I have all these autumn leaves. If I want to move those into my new folder, so I'm going to move them into this fall folder. If I left click and drag that file over to my fall and just drop it into the fall folder, it shows a little number here, and you should see that number increase. If you are accessing it in your recent downloads folder, you will see that design disappear out of the library. If you are accessing it in the all files and you're moving the files from the all files into your folders, you're not going to see it disappear because you're viewing all files. So if we come back down here again, I'll do it again. I'm going to grab this autumn leaf and I'm just going to drag it over into my fall folder and drop it in there. And then it's going to change the number, 45, it's added it to that folder. If you want to do multiples at a time, you can hold your shift key down, click on your first one, hold your shift key down and click on multiples. And then with the multiples selected, you can move it into the fall folder. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that in some of the later, more current versions of the Silhouette software, higher, usually I think it's 4.4.8 plus, the multiple selection and moving to the folders is broken. It is a bug, it's been reported. So if you encounter that, you can either go back, I'm using version 4.4.552, and then you could move multiple files at the same time, or you'd have to move them one by one. So that is how you're going to create folders within your recent downloads. And then you can spend your time moving your files around into those folders. if that is the organization way that works best for you. For me, I get lazy and I don't move the files over, so you can see I have quite a few just in the recent downloads. But I do also have quite a few different folders, which we'll show here at the top as these little gray folders, that I've created to work on my organization. So part of this whole series, I am working along with you. Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is the user design section. It works the same way as your recent downloads. You can create folders in it. You can add a new folder. You can move things into those folders. The main thing, like I said, I don't usually store a whole lot in my Silhouette library of my personal designs. You can see here I have a folder called Craft Chameleon because I do a lot of etching with the Curio. So I have added those files in for easy access or for when I'm teaching a class, when I'm traveling or offsite. So I have those in my Silhouette library. But I also have those files backed up to my external hard drive. So if something should happen in the Silhouette library, or my computer crashed and I can't get it back, something doesn't sync properly, I would still have access to those files. So I just keep a very minimal amount. As you can see, I have only used 569.4 megabytes in my 5 gigs of hard drive space, or in my cloud space. I don't store a whole lot in my library. The more you store in your library, the more space it takes up. If you get close to your limit, you can start to have issues within the Silhouette software, within the library itself. If you exceed your limit, you will also end up having issues there too. So you want to keep an eye on that. The next one I want to talk about is your fonts. So we're going to come up here and I have this fonts folder. If I expand that out by clicking on the plus sign, you have all kinds of different fonts. These are only fonts from the Silhouette Design Store. These are not outside fonts. The reason is because when you purchase something through the Silhouette Design Store, it comes through the software. So part of that coding is already in the software itself, and it can pull those into this fonts folder. When you have files and font files that you download from outside sources, that doesn't come through the software. So there's no way for it to pull in this information from the font file itself. Outside fonts are installed on your computer's C drive fonts folder, and then they're pulled into the software. And if I come over here to my text style panel on the design tab, those fonts that you see are all pulled from your computer C drive in your fonts folder. So it's not a way you can change that, and that's why they don't show up in your fonts folder within your library. So only Silhouette Design Store fonts will show up here in this fonts folder on your Silhouette library. A neat feature of the Silhouette library is you can actually organize these fonts. So you would create these new folders. So you can see here I chose new folder. I have a folder for dingbats, monogram, script, and sketch. And then you can move fonts into those folders. So I can left click, drag it down, and drop it into my sketch folder. I dropped it into the folder here. You can also drop it in, let's find this other one, drag it over to your library tree and drop it in there, and the number changes. And you'll see it adjust here on the screen. So if you have a font, now the one thing I want to mention here is that not all fonts will move into the fonts folders. In the last couple of years, there's been a really large increase in what's called premium fonts. And these are fonts that have the extra special characters. So more than just your 26 characters in your font file. That means that your file size is larger. There is more data in that file. So premium fonts cannot be usually moved into a folder. They would stay within this fonts folder themselves. The other thing about premium fonts is that you may need to install it directly on your computer C drive in the fonts folder first before you can access that full font file. And I have that all linked into the written description as well, in case you need to know how to install fonts. So again, premium fonts are the exception. They won't move into a folder. So I can try this. I think this one is a premium font. Big script. It'll just give you an error. It gives me this little circle with a X or a slash through it. It won't let me move that font into a folder. So it's just going to hang out and sit in your general fonts folder. So the other neat thing about the fonts, and the reason to organize within your fonts, is if we click up here on the design tab, we can go back over here. I'm going to click on this A again to open up the text style panel. And then your font folders that you've created will actually show up at the top. You have a couple. If you scroll up in your text style panel, you have frequently used, recently used, and then below that, you're going to start to see your folders that you have created. So if you have fonts that you use often from the Silhouette Design Store, I have Monogram, I have Dingbats up above, I have Sketch, you can find those fonts a little bit easier. They are still in the main list. If I scroll down a little bit farther, it'll show all fonts. So they still show up in the main list, but any of those font folders that you've created here are going to show up in the text style panel. While I'm here, above that is your favorites. Your favorites, if you right click on it, you're going to notice that it does not give you options. Favorites is already its own sort of folder. It's separate. You cannot create folders within it to organize within that. It is just marking those as a favorite. Now the next part we're going to talk about is our patterns folder. So if I click on my patterns folder, all of these are printable patterns. These are not cut files, they're not cut patterns, but they are printable patterns. So if you purchase any of the printable patterns from the Silhouette Design Store, they will load automatically into this patterns folder. You can also add your own patterns into this folder if you have the Designer Edition upgrade or higher. The neat part about this is you can organize your library. So you can organize this folder and add new sections. You can see here I have 2 Caesar patterns and I have 2 Sparkleberry patterns, or I have 5 different Sparkleberry. So I have a Sparkleberry section. And then what I can do is this will be pulled into the fill color panel. So if I click back on design, click on my fill color panel, and on the 3rd tab is my fill patterns. You're going to need to give it probably a couple seconds to load all those patterns. And then when I scroll down, all of my user created pattern folders will be in there. So I have an easy way to access those patterns, and you could create new folders and organize your patterns by color, by shape, or the geometric pattern, different things like that. So I have some that are wood and marble and concrete, so you could have a naturals folder. So it's really just going to be whatever works for you. Now, the one thing I will mention is in this library organization, however you organize it, it needs to be something that works for you. There are sometimes a few things that I will call quirks that you might see. I mentioned when we were going through my recent downloads folder, if I expand that out, that I had some duplicates in here. So I have a folder with 3D flowers that has a number next to it. Then I have just an empty folder that says 3D flowers. I can try to delete this and then go all the way down to my recycle bin and empty the recycle bin, and then sync. Always want to click sync after I've made some changes. And then if I come back up here, the folder should be gone, but sometimes when I log back in the next time, that new blank folder will be reappeared. This isn't really, it's more of just an annoyance than anything harmful, so I just tend to ignore it if it happens again. Personally, I'm on the beta team and I bounce back and forth between several different versions all the time. So sometimes it happens to me just because I am doing that. But otherwise, if you get duplicate folders and they won't disappear for good, just try to ignore them. Sometimes it's just more of an annoyance than anything else. And then the other thing is sometimes I've noticed that, and it could be because I bounce around between different versions, but the library organization doesn't always stay put. So I wouldn't necessarily sit down here and go through all my 6,000 files that are in my recent downloads and organize all of those at one time. I'm going to test it, maybe do 25 or 50, and then make sure that you sync after you've done that. And then after you're done, click on your name in the top and do a library export. This way you always have this library export here is a backup file only. It is something that if something screwed up with the library, you could import your library back in if needed. It's not always needed, and have that library be restored again. I cover a lot of that details in the part 1 of the series for the organization that I have linked below. We cover both the library export and the export user created files. Those are two different things, and we cover that in detail in that post. So there's a lot of detail here in the library. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. You can click this little square icon like I did earlier, and it brings up the information for your design. All kinds of things. Just start playing around, start clicking. Move your files around a little bit. Make sure you sync. Make sure you do your export. If the files don't stay put, I just give it some time. Come back a little while later, but I don't want you to do 1,000 or 2,000 files and then come back and nothing has changed, because that's a little bit of a waste of time. And it could be why I have the 6,000 files. I just use the search most times, but we're going to work on this library organization and see what we can do. I hope this has given you a few tips for your Silhouette experience today. Stay tuned for more in the Silhouette organization series. Have a great day. Thank you.